Hello, hello, and welcome to the show. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out again. It's greatly appreciated. Have you ever cared for somebody only to find out that although they claimed to love you, they didn't really care at all? And you find out that they were only just using you, and in fact they're using all kinds of other people as well? You know, it can be very hurtful when you find out this kind of thing, especially when you've given your heart and soul to this person. I know, because I found out the hard way. It was involving the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. I'd actually given 30 years of my life to them. I'd given them my love, my energy, my support, my time, gave up getting an education. I was willing to even give them my life. And then I found out that I was nothing more than just a number to them, and that they didn't really care about me at all. I was completely expendable. It's a very hurtful thing to find out. And that's why this show is so important for you today, because there are many people today that are also giving up everything for this organization. And they don't realize that the organization doesn't really care about you at all. Oh, I know that they claim to love you. In fact, let's see what they recently said on their JW broadcasting show.
And as for you, we've said it before, but we're going to say it again. We love you all very, very much.
It's icky, isn't it? So if you're going to give all your love and energy and everything you have to an organization, you really need to know what they're all about. I mean, as they say, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So I've put together 10 ways to show that the Jehovah's Witnesses organization really doesn't care about you.
Only 10?
Well, there are actually more than 10, but we only have so much time. So the first item that I put on my list is how they treat victims of sexual abuse, and that they treat them as adversaries. I mean, if they really cared about their victims, they would do something to help them. Instead, they seek to silence them. They don't do anything until a second child is abused. And if you try to warn other parents within the organization, you can get disfellowshipped for causing what they call divisions. It's a crazy situation. And even in a best case scenario, if somebody is disfellowshipped for molesting children within the organization, they don't go to the authorities. So this person is disfellowshipped and no longer part of the congregation, but he's free to molest children outside in the world. So not only do they not care about children within their own organization, but they certainly don't care about children outside the organization either. And they do nothing to protect them. Let's see what happened at the Royal Australian High Commission when an elder took the stand. See what he had to say about this.
What about people who are not close friends of yours, others than outside of the church? You don't take any steps, do you, to protect them from this potential reoffending? You don't, do you? You're concerned with the congregation principally, aren't you?
We're concerned with the congregations. We are shepherds of the congregation.
Yes, and you're not a shepherd to those who are not in the congregation.
No.
And as an organisation, in your experience, you don't seek to protect or take care of children who are outside of the congregation.
That's a broad statement.
Well, I can limit it.
Yeah, limit it,
In your
please.
decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation.
Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia?
Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
Did you notice that long pause? It's like it never even occurred to him that the organization is doing nothing to help prevent children from being molested from known pedophiles within the organization. Very odd. And then last month, the most viewed show in Portugal on primetime television was a show that was talking about all the abuses within the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. So many witnesses called up the society in Portugal that they actually sent governing body member David Splain there to help explain the situation. What he said, though, gives us a really good insight as to how the Jehovah's Witnesses organization prefers to handle things when they hear about these kinds of abuses.
Now, sometimes the brothers will phone New York and they'll say, "Why don't you do something about this? This was a terrible program. What do you want us to do?" The journalist has a closed mind. The journalist isn't interested in the truth. And so we usually just leave things as they are and let the story die.
So instead of helping their victims and fixing the problems, they'd rather deny and let the story die. You see, this is another reason why I feel I need to speak out, because I'm not going to let these kinds of stories die. They're too important. People need to hear, and there's too many people's lives that are being ruined as a result of things like this. So this leads us to point number 2. Women who are being abused are often blamed, and the organization doesn't even care. In fact, women who are in excessively violent homes are even encouraged to stay with their husbands. Let's look and see what this Watchtower study article had to say about that. This is from the February 15th, 2012 Watchtower, talking about a woman that they call Selma. It says that she didn't want to have her Bible study that day because the night before her husband Steve had hit her. But then the sister tries to pin it on her by asking, well, how many acts of love do you show towards your husband? And just who is trying to be the Christian here? It says that she realized that she needed to adjust her thinking. And then it shows that 17 years later, Steve accepted the truth. This is actually a huge problem within the organization. Women are told that if they do try to leave these violent husbands of theirs, they're never allowed to remarry. And if they do try and remarry, they're disfellowshipped. There was actually a television show that related a true story that happened. It was aired in 2014. It was of a JW sister who was married to a man who was also a Jehovah's Witness, and he was very violent with her, and she repeatedly left him. But the elders kept trying to push her to go back to him, and eventually he ended up killing her and her 2 kids. I'll put the link to this program down below. So the number 3 reason why I say that the organization doesn't care about you is that members are blamed when false dates are given. It's actually almost kind of funny when you think about it. So the organization gives you the wrong date. They completely mislead you. They insist that they're right. And they punish you when you tell them that they're wrong. And then when the date turns out to be wrong, do they apologize? Nope, they don't care. Do they take any of the blame? No, in fact, they blame you, their readers and their followers and their members. Many in the 1980s were disfellowshipped and then shunned for disagreeing with the organization's belief that the 1914 generation would not die before the end would come. And now the organization has changed it to the overlapping generation theory, which is nowhere found in the scriptures. Did they reverse their punishment of disfellowshipping and exonerate those ones? Nope, they don't care. Check out some of these quotes from their own publications. You can see here from January 8, 1982 till October 22, 1995, the Awake magazine masthead said, "The Creator's promise of that generation that saw events of 1914 passes away." But then on November 8, 1995, they quietly removed those words, 1914, and they called it the present wicked, lawless system of things. Take a look at these other quotes from various Watchtower publications. All the references are listed there. They talk about 1914 and the things that happen around there as being God's dates. They said it's an established truth. They say it's definitely marked in Scripture. But then after 1914 and the end didn't come, they say, oh, we merely inferred it. Now we're going to look at some quotes regarding 1925 from the Millions Now Living Will Never Die book. Talking about the year 1925, they said, "We must reach the indisputable conclusion that millions now living will never die." But then in 1926, when nothing had happened, they said that this was merely an expressed opinion. We see further quotes regarding 1925 from the Watchtower in 1924. It says that the year 1925 is a date definitely and clearly marked in scriptures, even more clearly than that of 1914. But then again, when nothing happened in 1926, this is what they had to say. Some anticipated that the work would end in 1925, but the Lord did not state so. The difficulty was that the Friends inflated their imaginations beyond reason, and that when their imaginations burst asunder, they were inclined to throw away everything. But the embarrassment didn't end there, because then they further went on to make predictions regarding the year 1975. In the 1968 Watchtower, talking about 1975, is that it may involve only a difference of weeks or months, not years. And then the 1968 Awake magazine says only a few years at most remain before the end. But then again, when nothing happened in 1975, from a 1976 Watchtower magazine, it says, "If anyone has been disappointed through not following this line of thought, he should now concentrate on adjusting his viewpoint, seeing that it was not the word of God that failed or deceived him and brought disappointment, but that his own understanding was based on wrong premises." This one here's a real gem. It's from the Watchtower of 1995. It says that, "Eager to see the end of this evil system, Jehovah's people have at times speculated about the time when the Great Tribulation would break out, even tying this to calculations of what is the lifetime of a generation since 1914. However, we bring a heart of wisdom in, not by speculating about how many years or days make up a generation, but by thinking about how we count our days in bringing joyful praise to Jehovah." So once again, blaming the members. I mean, where do you think the members got these dates from? It was highly encouraged by the organization. And then when nothing happened, they turned it around and pinned it all on the members. So when it comes to all the false dates that the organization has given, like with their pedophile matters, they make no apologies. But instead, they do what governing body member David Splain says here.
Usually just leave things as they are and let the story die.
This leads us to point number 4. Faithful members are often cast aside and ignored once they get old. There are very few commands in the New Testament, but one of them is to look after widows. Does the organization have any types of programs to look after widows or older ones? No, they don't. So a person can spend their entire life slaving for the organization, doing everything that's required of them. And then they find themselves older and completely ignored. These ones, many of them follow the Society's counsel to not have children, and now they've got no one to look after them. But instead, they find themselves in old age homes, completely forgotten. The sad truth is that the organization no longer has any use for these older ones, and this is why they're cast aside in this manner. Well, maybe the organization does care about their money. And this leads us to the next point, point number 5. The funerals of faithful members barely even mention the deceased. It's really weird. It's like they really show no respect for the dead. Instead, the organization hijacks the occasion to use it as an infomercial to push their own beliefs. Look what it says here in a February 8, 1999 Awake magazine article. "If you are a Jehovah's Witness, you are used to the full while you were alive, and continue to be used even after you die. In a kingdom hall, they don't make it a practice to let bereaved loved ones speak a few words. And women for sure wouldn't be allowed to get up and say anything." And this leads us to point number 6. If you're a woman, and there's a 50% chance that you are, the best situation that you could hope for is if you married somebody who had a title within the organization and were able to ride on his coattails so you could catch his gravy train. You could be a woman who is of the anointed class, who they believe will rule as a king and a priest in heaven over the earth. But if an 8-year-old boy is the only baptized brother at the service group, you will either say the prayer, or if you say the prayer, you will need to cover your head in submission to the child. Check out this clip of a talk given by governing body member Samuel Hurd, and hear what he has to say regarding women.
You know, scientists say that the cranial capacity of a woman is 10% smaller than that of a man. So now this shows that she's just not equipped for the role of headship. Her role is one of subjection to the man. Her role is that of submissiveness, and that means that she should recognize that she is a woman and be glad to be a woman. Never want to be what you are not equipped to be. But we'll hear a sister say, oh, if I were an elder, I'd show them a thing or two. Or sometimes we hear them say, oh, if I were a man, I do this and I do that. As if to be wishing to be something that he's not designed to be. Do you know what that borders on? That borders on homosexuality. And you know what the devil is doing nowadays? He's taking women.
If you were to do a little bit more research into brain size and sex, you'll see that this information that was just presented could be skewed in many different ways. In fact, others have used it to try to put down other races. Women at the end of the day have more gray matter than men, and men have more white matter. But what it all boils down to is that only someone with a small mind would try to use this kind of information to oppress other people. This leads us to point number 7, that the lives and suffering of members are all completely expendable. Witnesses have unnecessarily died for principles that they thought were from Jehovah God, but turned out that they were from men. In some countries, for example, if you refuse to report for military service, you could say that you're a conscientious objector, and then you would be given a comparable civilian service to do, like perhaps fixing army uniforms. But at one time, even that wasn't acceptable for Jehovah's Witnesses, and many of them spent years in prison. Did they care about this? No. The strange thing is witnesses were spending sometimes up to 10 or more years in prison over what they thought was something that Jehovah had required of them. And at the end of the day, when they were released, and when the organization actually changed the ruling on this and said it is okay to accept this kind of service, they said that these ones who spent time in prisons should be happy about it. Let's look and see where this actually is said in their publications. From the United in Worship book, it says that an examination of the historical facts shows that not only have Jehovah's Witnesses refused to put on military uniforms and take up arms, but it says that they also declined to do non-combatant service or to accept other work assignments as a substitute for military servants, and that many of them had suffered as a result and had been imprisoned. But I love how they say that they would not violate their Christian neutrality. The fact of the matter is that this was put upon them by the organization, and if they went against the organization and did do these comparable services, they could find themselves disfellowshipped. But then this stance changed. In the Watchtower of 1996, it talks about here that what though if the state requires a Christian for a period of time to perform civilian service that is a part of national service under a civilian administration? It says that is his decision before Jehovah. So at least finally they admitted to that. But then look what they had to say in the Watchtower of 1998. This article is truly hysterical. It talks about how some witnesses have suffered for refusing to share in an activity that their conscience now might permit, and that how this was their choice. And then look what it goes on to say in the next paragraph. Was it unrighteous on Jehovah's part to allow him to suffer? Wow. Now they're even blaming God for all of this. It says, rather they should rejoice for having followed their own conscience. I mean, where do I even begin with this? It's absolutely ridiculous. So again, they're trying to say that it was the person's conscience when it clearly wasn't. This was put upon them by the organization, and if they violated the organization, they could find themselves disfellowshipped. And then they try and say that it was Jehovah who caused this suffering, and that now that these ones who spent all these years in prison should rejoice. Clearly, the organization could not care a less about their members. Having an organ transplant was at one time supposedly forbidden by Jehovah, but as time has ticked forward, we see that it wasn't from Jehovah at all, but that it was from men. How many people died as a result of not having an organ transplant? We don't know, but the organization doesn't care. Let's look and see what their publications have to say about it. From the 1967 Watchtower magazine, talking about organ transplants, it compared them to be like cannibalism and that they were not acceptable. But then 13 years later, in the March 15, 1980 Watchtower magazine, they asked the question again, and they said, actually, it's a matter for conscientious decision by each one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It goes, some Christians might feel that taking into their bodies any tissue or body part from another human is cannibalistic. No, nobody thought that. That is absolutely insane. But that is what they taught. And I'm just thankful that they actually reversed this ridiculous stand. Point number 8 is that the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is the worst employer in the world. As of January 1st of 2016, thousands of Bethelites and special pioneers were laid off. And what were they given in return? Nothing. Just basically, thank you. Thanks for all your help. Goodbye. Which is what's so different from the corporate world, or, the Satan's world, that they always like to say. When you're laid off from a job in the corporate world, you're given a severance package, you're given employment insurance, you are given references, you may be given leads on another job, you may be even given a course on how to write a good resume or how to be successful on a job interview, and you probably already have some savings. And you probably have a roof over your head. These people are literally being shown the door with none of those things. And they're basically told, keep warm and well fed. Point number 9 is that they don't want to hear your opinion, and they will tolerate no questions or no criticism. When you study the Bible with them, you're not actually studying the Bible. What you are doing is studying their publications. And their studies in the publications are set up in a question and answer format. So when they ask the question, they don't want you to think about the answer. They want you to literally parrot it right out of the paragraph. See, this is part of their indoctrination process. So, in fact, they call independent thinking something from Satan, and as if it's like a 4-letter word. We see here the January 15th, 1983 Watchtower, and under the subheading, Avoid Independent Thinking, we see that it is Satan who they say is the one who promotes independent thinking. And that how is this manifested? By questioning the counsel that is provided by God's visible organization. So questioning them is likened to being like Satan and is a major no-no. So you're supposed to just, right or wrong, just go along. They will tell you what to believe and when to believe it, and you'd better keep any doubts to yourself or you will likely get disfellowshipped and shunned. Point number 10 is that the organization loves to take from you, but never gives. They love to take your time, your energy, your family, your efforts. Anything you have to give them, they will take. But don't ever, ever ask them for anything, because they won't give you a dime. From shamelessly guilting children into giving their ice cream money, to the many times they ask for your hard-earned money, your wills, your stocks, your bonds, your insurance, etc. They have billions of dollars, but don't ask them for a loan. Even congregations have to pay back interest on their loans from the society. They have lawyers, but none for you. Don't call the police should you get sexually abused by an elder to protect yourself or anybody else, but ensure you call their legal department so they can protect themselves by keeping it quiet and preserve their billions of dollars. As I mentioned in the beginning, I used to feel that the Watchtower Society cared about me. I did everything that I was asked to do. If they wanted me to give a short notice talk, I would do it. If they wanted me to appear in a convention program, I would do it. If they wanted me to drive somebody somewhere or work with different people, I was always there for them. I think this is why I thought they cared about me. I mean, who wouldn't care for somebody who's completely slaving for you? Do this. Okay, do that. Sure. You know, but what changed was I began to see that it was a bit of a one-way street. You see, I was having some marital problems at the time, and I went to the elders in confidence. And I told them, and I said, is there anything that you could do to help me? And of course they were like, yes, we're more than willing to help you. We'll come to your place, we'll visit, we'll talk with him. None of that ever happened. But what really started changing things for me was when I was stuck in New York City. You see, it was a long weekend in the States, and I was stuck without a hotel. I didn't know anybody in the city. I had nowhere to go. I managed to get my hands on a copy of the hotel lodgings list that Bethel has, and I called literally every single hotel on that list, and there was not one vacancy. And I didn't know what to do. So I called Bethel back again. I said, I'm a regular pioneer. I just need a room for the night. I'm willing to pay for it. Can you help me? You know, in fact, let's do a reenactment of it. Let's pretend I'm 15 years younger, and I'm calling from the payphone. I don't know if they even have payphones, but there was a payphone at the lobby of the Empire State Building. You say you're a pioneer, but what kind of full-time service are you in? I'm a regular pioneer. Oh, I'm sorry, but you need to be a special pioneer or a missionary to stay here. Call one of the hotels on our recommended lodgings list. I did, and none of them have any vacancies. I'm really stuck. I don't know anyone here, and I don't know what to do. I'd be happy to pay for a room. Sorry, but we can't help you. I was so disillusioned, I just stood there with tears in my eyes. It was like I was just kicked in the stomach. All I could think about was all that I'd given up. You know, 30 years of my life I'd given to this organization. And they weren't even prepared to lift a finger to help me. I mean, they could have helped me, but they just chose not to. You see, I wasn't the right kind of pioneer. I was only giving 90 hours a month, and not 120 hours. I should have said to them, you know, don't worry. I'm sure the Salvation Army or a nearby church would be more than happy to help me. And this was really the beginning of my wake-up and the beginning of my realization that the Jehovah's Witness organization doesn't really care at all about you. You're just a number, completely dispensable. So let's review now the list of things that we discussed today. They treat victims of child abuse as adversaries. Victims of spousal abuse are blamed. Members are blamed when false dates were given. Faithful members are cast aside and often ignored when they get old. The memorials of faithful members barely mention the deceased. Women are treated as second-class citizens. The lives and sufferings of members are all expendable. The organization is the worst employer. Bethelites and special pioneers are expendable. They don't want to hear your opinion, don't want you to think, and will tolerate no criticism. The organization loves to take from you, but never gives. So what do you think when you see this clip?
We love you all very, very much.
Yeah, me too. The old double thumbs down. Thank you for watching my video, and if you liked it, then like it. Thank you. Bye-bye.